LDComics is a women-led, welcoming to all forum run by creators. We champion the graphic novel form, particularly works with an autobiographical voice. Our activity is towards supporting and equipping graphic novelists, especially but not exclusively people identifying as women. Established in 2009 by Sarah Lightman and Nicola Streeton as Ladies Do Comics, today LDComics is run by a committee of published graphic novelists: Rachel Ball, Emma Burley, Lou Crosby, Wallace Eates and Nicola Streeton. From the start, the core of LDC's activity has been the monthly meetings, hosting presentations from invited guests to a public audience in a welcoming atmosphere for networking and making friends. The introduction of LDC online monthlies aims to replicate the joy and stimulation of our physical meetups. Everyone is welcome.
Okay, so good evening, everyone. Very honoured to be here. My name's Neill Cameron. I'm a comics writer and artist, based here in Oxford in the UK. I will show you some. So yeah, I make comics. I mostly work for a weekly children's comic called The Phoenix. I was going to show you a few examples of my work and then talk a little bit about sort of, because I have quite a specific sort of corner of the comics world that I'm in. So I was going to talk a little bit about some of the specific joys and challenges of making weekly comics for children. So let me see if I can share my slides with you. Oh, wow. Awesome. Yeah. So I make comics, as I say, sort of mostly for children. The Phoenix, I think we say it's sort of usually it's aimed at kids sort of between the ages of 6 and 12, although there is a lot of sort of that's very porous barriers on either end. We get very young kids reading it, and indeed people read it up into adulthood. We have a lot of parents who read it secretly. These are just some of my characters, some of the sort of things that I like to draw, I suppose. Robots. I like drawing robots. I like drawing dinosaurs. I really like those kind of fun adventure comics, sort of serials for kids. This is so the Phoenix has been around for a while now. This was the very first issue of the Phoenix back in 2012. So it's 13 years it's been going for now. That's the cover of the very first issue, which I drew, which was a story that I drew back in the very early days there, called The Pirates of Pangaea, which was about kids riding around, meeting pirates and having adventures on dinosaurs. So it was that was a very fun thing to draw. Then a couple of years into the Phoenix, I sort of switched over and I started a new story called Mega Robo Bros. So this was 2014. I started drawing this. That was the first issue it was in. And then I spent the next 10 years drawing that story. Those are just a few of the Phoenix covers from those 10 years of storytelling. And that just recently concluded last year in the comic. So I was telling that story for 10 years. Not every week it would sort of come and go. We would have breaks because I can't draw that fast. But it was a pretty solid presence in the comic there for 10 years, which is, a million years in child terms. So it felt like a long time. It's a story about these two characters who are robots, as you can probably see from, intuit from this. They are robots and they live in the future. Alex is the blue robot, who is sort of the older sibling, who is a bit more sensible, a bit more thoughtful, a bit more reserved. Freddy is the younger sibling. He is the little brother. And as I like to say, he is like all little brothers everywhere. He is an irritating little maniac, but with lasers. So it's sort of the whole joy of the story for me was it has all that sort of science fiction, action, movie, superhero stuff. It's all very sort of dialed up and high action and cool, awesome things happening. Here we had, for example, a fight scene in the middle of central London, in sort of just off Leicester Square, where a big building robot's gone out of control and it's smashing up all the buildings, and Alex and Freddy have to fight it. And at one point, it just hoiks a branch of Starbucks out of the ground and throws it at our main character. So really just the most sort of over-the-top ridiculous action you could possibly imagine. But the lovely thing about it was it wasn't just sort of in that mode or in that register all the time. I could really do whatever I liked with this strip. So one week it would be sort of ridiculous, over the top action like that, and then another week the whole story would just be about Alex and Freddy going to the corner shop with their dad, and their dad saying they can have one Kinder Egg each, and them having to choose Kinder Egg each from the. I think this was a very specific moment in time I made this story, when Kinder Egg decided that chocolate eggs were gendered now, and you had to have either blue or pink eggs, and so kids had to choose their egg. And for some children, of course, that's a very straightforward choice. And you see Freddy there just knows straight away where to go and which egg is for him. And for some kids, maybe it's not as straightforward a choice. And for Alex here, it sort of opens up a whole emotional can of worms, and something that we sort of get into quite a lot in the story. And so just sort of going from those extremes of sort of big, loud action to sort of quiet interior character stuff was really the joy of the strip for me. Why I love making it, and why I didn't get bored making it for 10 whole years, I suppose. As it went on, so yeah, it finished in the Phoenix last year, and it has been collected together as a series of graphic novels. The 8th and final one just came out last month, so it is now complete. The entire story is complete. And as it went on, it got sort of increasingly sort of mature in some ways. I'd say increasingly emotionally intense for readers and for me as a creator. And making that final volume was very intense, and sort of quite difficult, because there's a lot of pressure to to stick the landing, really, to get the ending right. A lot of kids are very emotionally invested in these characters by this point, and sort of ending their story and finishing it and sort of paying everything off in a way that doesn't suck felt like a lot of pressure. And I think at some point the pressure of doing that broke my brain slightly, and so as a sort of release valve, I started drawing these comics, which is called Donut Squad, which are just little sort of 4-panel gag strips, again appearing in the Phoenix, and it's just about donuts saying silly things and being silly. I'll show you the first couple. These are the very first couple of Donut Squad strips I drew. So donut wanting to be eaten there, going, eat me, eat me. Ooh, donuts, delicious. Eat me. Don't mind if I do. Eat me. Oh, no thanks. I'm actually trying to be healthy. Eat me, you coward. So, it's less emotionally intense, this strip, I would say. It's just a very, very silly comic where I make myself laugh and draw fun donuts. This was, I think, the second strip I ever drew, sort of introducing some of the cast of characters. You got Sprinkles there, who is fun, upbeat, the leader of the gang. Jammy Boy, who's the cheeky one, and Chalky, who's the ghost of a murdered Victorian donut. So, I don't even know what that means. Does that make any sense? No. How do you murder a donut? I don't know, but it's just, very silly, funny jokes. And I'm just having such a whale of a time making that. It's much less sort of emotionally pressured for me. What I wanted to talk about, I suppose, was about because it is quite a specific sort of corner of the comics world, making weekly comics for children that come out in a sort of anthology format, and some of the joys of that as a creator, and some of the challenges of it creatively, I suppose. One of the first great things about weekly comics, if you're telling a sort of serial, an ongoing story, is of course the cliffhanger, the sort of the fact that every week the story has to end on a very exciting moment that's going to make the readers sort of want to come back and read more. But also, crucially, because these are young readers and they are subscribers generally, so they are getting it every week. We know they're coming back for more. So it's really about leaving them sort of thinking about the story and wondering about what's going to happen, and sort of imagining their own version of what could happen. I think that's one of the really key ways in which comics can sort of interact with children's creative imaginations, is sort of reading it and then wanting to sort of make up your own version of what happens next. So we had a whole sort of range of cliffhangers in Mega Robo. Sometimes it will be like here at the start of the sort of the final series, Alex and Freddy, our robot characters, got sort of depowered. They were sort of stripped of all their powers and abilities and sort of became just regular puny humans who couldn't fly or shoot lasers or anything. So that was one. What's going to happen to them now? That's one kind of cliffhanger. But then another week it might be just sort of giant epic science fiction cliffhanger. There's a giant city full of robots are sort of rebelling and declaring war on humanity, and the city's rising up into the sky, and that's sort of a much bigger sort of action movie type cliffhanger. What's going to happen with that? Then another week it might be that it turns out that their mum is going to have a baby, so they're going to have a little brother or sister, a human brother or sister. They're adopted, obviously. And so that's a very different sort of cliffhanger, but again, a really sort of huge thing in a kid's world. The family is changing. Things are different now. Then another week, a more sort of traditional form of cliffhanger. Their house blows up, and if in doubt, explosions make a good kind of moment to end an episode on, I suppose. Explosions are always fun. But the key point of that, I suppose, is so it keeps the readers engaged in the story and sort of thinking about the story over that week between installments. But also the benefit then when you collect this stuff together is, you have it's told in weekly installments of like 4 pages, and you end each episode on a dramatic cliffhanger. That means when you collect it together as a book, you have something really exciting happening at least every 4 pages, and that tends to make for quite an exciting page-turny book. So I think that's a real benefit of making comics this way. I think if someone gave me 200 pages and said, "Here, just draw whatever you like," I just wouldn't know where to start. I'd noodle forever. But this sort of enforces a kind of full of ideas and full of action sort of structure. The other really cool thing about making a weekly comic for kids is that your readers have a very intense relationship with your comics. So they, again, as I say, they're subscribers. They tend to be getting the comic every week. They will be very familiar with it. They'll pore over it. They'll read every word of it 17 times. And that's a wonderful thing and a great privilege, as a creator. But also it means you can do some really fun things and mess with their heads in some really fun ways. So after we've been doing Donut Squad for a couple of months, I started doing these strips about the Donut Squad Legion of Enthusiasm, which was like sort of a fan club for kids who like donuts. And I set them sort of missions to carry out. So mission 1 was to practice singing the Donut Squad theme song repeatedly, as loudly as possible, just encouraging kids to annoy their family members by singing made-up songs at them. Mission 2 there is to recruit additional family members into the Legion of Enthusiasm. So you can see he's recruiting a toddler and a cat into our ranks. And then mission 3, this was actually, this whole thing happened by accident, because originally the 4th panel there was supposed to be, there's going to be a drawing of a child sort of standing on a street corner with a notebook and wearing one of those donut hats and looking at a police station and a bank. And the text was going to say, mission 3, identify any high value strategic targets in your neighborhood. Await further orders. And my editors felt that was a little bit too terroristy. And they got a bit nervous about that one. So I was asked to come up with an alternative punchline. And so I came up with this one of a kid just eyeing a plate of bagels and saying, keep an eye on any bagels in your home. They may be planning something. So I thought, what would the natural enemy of a donut be? A bagel, because they're almost exactly the same. But then the beauty of the Phoenix, why they're such a joy to work for, is they're enablers. They're very sort of yes and type people. So my editor, Joe Brady, said, well, what's up with these bagels? Are they planning something? And so obviously then we had to make a second strip for the Phoenix called The Bagel Battalion, in which it turns out that, yes, these bagels are also alive and are indeed planning something, and they're planning to take revenge on their ancient enemies, the Donut Squad. So I'm laughing at my own jokes a lot here, and that's very undignified. But it was beautiful because for a few months we had we had the Donut Squad strip running at the start of the comic, and the Bagel Battalion strip running on sort of one of the pages towards the end of the comic. And they would sort of running in sequence and start to feed into each other in ways that the kids sort of had to be paying attention to notice. And then it became more and more obvious what was going on. And so after a certain point, there was this, in Donut Squad, there was this campaign where this pressure group here called Moms Against Donuts started an anti-donut campaign because donuts are ruining the nation's teeth and their minds. And so they started this anti-donut campaign, which obviously is bad from the donuts point of view. But then you would turn to the back of the comic and there would be the Bagel Battalion strip, and you'd see the leader of this movement go backstage and then pull off her rubber mask, and it would turn out that that was actually a bagel in disguise, plotting this whole thing. I did mention it's quite a silly comic, didn't I? Then one of our stars here, Anxiety Donut, who's a donut who suffers from crippling anxiety, he was sent on a mission to find out who was behind all this, and he had to step outside the panels of his own comic and go exploring, following this sort of trail of sesame seeds to find out who was behind it. And he walked through the pages of the entire rest of the Phoenix that week and sort of was like peering in at the other strips and seeing what was going on. This is one of my other strips, which is a sort of fantasy story, Daughters of the Demon. And so there he is down in the corner, just absolutely freaking out at the sight of all this madness. And it all culminated in this, which is, I think, my single favorite comic I've ever been involved with, which was, so we had the Donut Squad were on the cover of the comic. And then in their strip, which is, as I say, sort of towards the front of the comic, the Donut Squad all ran out of the panels of their strip and charged through the rest of the comic. So they were like rampaging across the editorial pages and like across the letters page and that sort of thing. And then meanwhile, the back cover was that week, as if it was another front cover, it was the Bagel Battalion cover. And the Bagel Battalion there in their strip were also going to wage war against the Donuts, where they had to sort of run backwards through the pages of the comic. And they ran through these other strips and not just sort of looked at them, but I had them run through and actually sort of steal things from the other strips and sort of take them to use in their big battle. So they ransacked the fantasy strip and stole a bunch of dinosaurs and accidentally ended the world. And then you can see them in the bottom right there, sort of going through a tear in the page. And meanwhile, the Bagels were on the warpath from the other side, running backwards through the comic, and they ransacked this science fiction strip here and stole a bunch of spaceships and robots. And then they met on the center spread of the comic and had this giant battle between donuts and bagels and dinosaurs and spaceships and robots. Yeah, it's just because the kids who read this comic are so sort of familiar with the rhythms and the format of it, that when you sort of mess with those and play with those, it just the readers responded so immensely to this. It was extraordinary. We've all been sort of chasing that high ever since, in a way, because I think it's such a fun thing, sort of, because it feels like a secret club that kids are in on, and they take such joy in sort of seeing rules get broken and sort of messed with, and just being playful with the form in that way, I suppose. How am I doing for time? Am I almost done, or?
I think you're fine, because it looks like there's only going to be 2 presentations tonight.
Okay, I can talk for a couple more minutes, show you one more thing.
Totally fine.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so the last sort of the great joy of making comics for children is again sort of that intense relationship that kids have with the comics that they love, and it sort of ties into the great thing I think about comics as a form for children, which is that they're so easy to join in and have a go at making your own, right? It's such a natural thing for kids to read the comics they love and then immediately start drawing their own version. You know, they don't have to be sort of set the assignment to do that or encouraged to do that. They will just very naturally sort of grab up some paper and some pens and start drawing their own stuff. We do work. I've done, for years now, I've been doing workshops in sort of schools and libraries, and then book festivals and things like that around the country. Last year we had a whole Phoenix festival here in Oxford, where it was like packed out the new theatre in Oxford. It was like 1,500 kids, I think, and just this sheer wall of noise of children screaming at me about donuts and bagels is generally one of the maddest experiences of my life, and a source of great joy. And it's just, and all those kids were just fired up and excited, and they're going to go and draw and make their own comics. And I think that's a really wonderful thing. I have in my house a sort of living piece of proof of this. My son has been drawing his own comics since he could hold a pen. And these are some of his early works. He created this comic about a race of evil aliens who were always trying to conquer the galaxy when he was 7 or 8 or something. And he drew literally hundreds of issues of this. And because I'm a comics artist, I have a lot of paper lying around. So I would just give him a stack of paper, and he would go nuts with it. And at some point then we started making these comics together, where sort of his characters, these evil aliens, the villainous, would meet my characters, Alex and Freddy from Mega Robo Bros, and they would have this whole sort of spin-off, sort of side continuity series of adventures together that only me and my son would ever read, which was very delightful to me. And then I started sneaking them into my comics. His characters sort of background jokes. I would like have sort of adverts for Villeneuve's the movie, sort of on the side of a bus in future London, things like that. And then I snuck them into a book here in a sort of video game VR form. And then when that whole donuts and bagels nonsense I was talking about happened, we needed a kind of fake strip that could run for a few weeks and then get trashed by bagels. And Logan volunteered that I could use his, and I was like, oh, that'd be cool. Yeah, it's like science fiction here. I could have spaceships in the big fight scene. That actually fits perfectly. So we collaborated. He wrote this strip for a few weeks, and I drew it, and then he graciously allowed us to have it destroyed by bagels in the silliest story anyone ever made. But it turned out it actually worked really well, and kids reading the comic really liked it. So now that is my new project. Now that I've finished Mega Robo Bros, my son writes the stories and I draw the pictures, and we're collaborating and making the Villeneuves together. And I sort of have accidentally not just created a comic, but created a comics creator, or / my own replacement, I guess. But yeah, that I think just speaks to the joy and some of the opportunities of making comics for this age range, particularly. It's a very, very fun thing to do, and I recommend it highly. I think that was everything I had to say.
Okay, so thank you for being here. I loved your talk, Neill. I really want to read your donut comic. So much fun. And I really love how you also went to a similar path as me into like working more analog than digital, because after a while that you work professionally, it's kind of like bothering, like spending so much time in front of a monitor. So I really, like I was feeling it when you were talking about it, and I will talk about it as well. So I make a lot of comics. Maybe I skipped this. So I make a lot of comics since I was a child. I grew up in a family in which, luckily, my dad loves comics, and he introduced me to comics when I was very young, and we also drew comics together. But then growing up, I realized that in Italy, especially, if you don't have a style that it's kind of mainstream, it's very difficult to make a living with comics. And I always wanted to draw for a living, and I found out there was illustration, and especially illustration for books. There is a much bigger market, even if it's still very precarious. So naturally, I kind of split myself into being an author, both of children book and mostly comics. I just made one children book, but also freelance illustrator. And during the years, and I think now I've been working around 17 years, 16 years as a freelancer. I did many type of different illustration work. But I always make comics, and it's where it started. I used to have a blog when I was a student in which I was posting my work. It was mostly autobiographical. And I also started going to comics fairs where I met other nerds like me, and we shared similar interests, and we started self-publishing stories. First, I was just drawing, and then I started also making my own self-publishing. And I also started a self-publishing label called Teiera, which means teapot in Italian. And we kind of lasted 5 years, and that was kind of like the way we built our, I guess, identity and our way of making stories. At least for me, it was very important. And I kept going with comics, but always on a side, till I was kind of burnout. I'm gonna make the longer story since we have more time. But till when I was burnout after 5 years of freelance illustration, and I had this comic that I wanted to make for a long time, but I didn't know how to write fiction because I was mostly doing either short stories, fictional, or my like autobiographical comics. But I had this idea of making a fictionalized story inspired by being a teenager from the countryside during a time in which there is not much to do in summertime, and there is no social media and not many ways to distract yourself, like was my teenage years, like were my teenage years. So I had this idea of wanting to tell the idea of boredom and angst that a teenager can live, and also being very angry and confused. But it took me forever to write, especially because I wasn't putting the time. I was always like fantasizing, but never really doing it. But during a moment in which I was particularly tired of being an illustrator for others, I started allowing myself to stop in work for a few days and just draw whatever I wanted. And I started doodling the characters of my comic that I drew. I used to draw them all the time, but without really going further with the story. But when I allow myself to do that just for a few days, I realized that actually I just need the time to make a little pitch. And I knew there was a comic residency in Angoulême. I don't know if you might know probably of this town in France, which is a very famous town for comics. There is one of the biggest comics festivals in Europe. And they also have an art residency for comic artists. And I knew because when I was studying as a student in Barcelona, I met some people that went and they were telling me about it. So my second B plan, always in the back of my head was that if I didn't have the time to make a comic, maybe I should have applied here. And if I was being taken, maybe I could have taking some time off from freelancing and also moving away from Italy, which at the time I really wanted to go back into living abroad because I spent 1 year in Barcelona and I really liked it. So was it like kind of a fantasy excuse to spend some time away from my real life and doing comics all the time. And they give you also an apartment that you share with cartoonists. It's like cartoonist dream. And so I started doing these character designs, and then I started making these pages for the pitch. For the pitch, you had to make minimum 5, I think, pages or 4 pages, and then the full plot. And I did a little bit more. And as you can see, I just used one color, especially because at the time I was very unsure with color. And also because I come from self-publishing where there isn't many, there is not much budget. And also you can play with these constraints in your favor. And so since it's a story about summer heat and also heat up relationships between this girl and her best friend, or this girl Raquel and her sister, I thought it would have been nice to use the color as a part of the language of the story. So I decided to make it very warm and using different tones for each month of the summer. So I did these pages, asked a friend to translate it in French, and I got selected. So what was supposed to be 4 months of art residency, it became a year and a month. And it kind of changed my life because I was able to spend a lot of time during my comic. I did 200 pages, which was huge for me at the time, and still, because after that, I didn't publish another long book like this. And also met many friends. And it was the beginning of then deciding to move to Barcelona, where I studied before. So this is like a wall of my studio that I had. I was sharing a studio with another girl. The Maison has many different rooms where you can share the studio or you can work alone. I was working with another person, and I started using the wall as a tool for storyboard the full story, because it was the first time that I had a story so long and complex for me. So my process was to work an outline of, I think, 5 pages in which I write everything that happened in the story. And then I started storyboarding the first chapter. Each chapter is a month. So the first chapter was June. And then like placing it on the wall was very helpful because I was able to kind of move pages if I was seeing that the rhythm wasn't really working or if I needed to tweak something. And since I left some part behind, but like since it takes a long to make a comic, I kind of learned to skip some like effort in the middle. Like basically I was starting, first I was doing these storyboards and then I was starting from zero to do the pencil in a bigger page because these are like A5. But then I realized I just can scan these and draw on top with a digital tool. Like I have a cinque and I pencil in Photoshop. And then I started printing this digital pencil and ink them analog. So it was kind of going on and off digital and analog constantly, but like skipping the early stage of redrawing from zero the pencil was very, very helpful. First, because when you do those storyboards, sometimes you can get some fresh sign that it's kind of hard to replicate. So if you manage to get the fresh sign of like action or expression, it's better to keep it safe. So just draw on top of it instead of like redraw it. And then, yeah, it kind of sped up also the process. And here is a little video that I'm gonna go kind of faster to show you the book. So this is the American version. It came out in 2021 in the US, but in Italian it came out in 2015. It came out for Dark Horse, which was kind of like a wow moment because I guess Dark Horse historically was publishing also comics that I think kind of different from my style, but I guess they expanded into also my work, which was awesome. As you can see, the chapters have different colors. I used just 2 Pantone, and I used for the first month the same Pantone of this very warm color, but lighten like 50%. And then this the opposite for this the warmest in August and the lightest same Pantone in September to give this arc of heat. This is like one of my latest self-published project. It's a little comic dedicated to my dog. This one is called Manual of Pipinology, which is a science I made up about my dog. You can see here the Spanish version, but lately I translated it and published it also in English, self-published. Even if I work as a professional, I really still cherish this space for like free time, free projects, personal projects, because I kind of feel like I can do stuff that sometimes clients don't ask me. And if I do it, then clients will ask me to do this thing. So my whole career as an illustrator has been built by personal project, and I keep trying to do that. It's not often easy because you don't have much time, but I always work very well with a deadline. And in Barcelona, there is this very nice comic festival called Graph, which now I also help to organize. That basically happen every March. So when you know that and you apply and they give you your table, you're gonna make a comic for it as an excuse. So originally, I just started doodling about my dog since I adopted him because it was kind of a dream come true, adopting a dog. So I started just taking notes, and the idea was to make short comic strips for Instagram, maybe eventually. I never thought like what the final product would have been. I just wanted to record on my notebook these cute moments. And then after a while, I realized I had quite a lot. So I thought it would have been the great chance to make a little zine for Graph. And this again is a part of the process of how I work. I scan the sketchbook that you can see on the left, And I kind of adapted it to a vertical A4 page. And then to the right, you can see the analog pencil ink, that it's kind of the final line. Normally before I would have done like a prep pencil in between, but since I started making more digital comics and blogging, like I started realizing that sometimes I'm much better being more spontaneous, even if I make some mistakes and then correct after, than overwork my drawing. So basically I have like a very thin paper that I use, like it's similar to a tracing paper, but it's like a white paper, still a little bit covering. I cannot find outside of Italy, but I can show you the brand. So basically I use it on top and I ink with my pencil. And if I make a mistake, it's a pencil, so I can erase it. And then I take the pencil, I scan it. Sorry, this is another example. I wanted to show you this example because sometimes I prefer the final, like kind of feels still maybe too much traditional. Like I kind of prefer sometimes the original sketch, like there is some freshness over there. I think this is like one of the tortures of many cartoonists. Like there is some life in the early stage of sketch that it's hard to replicate. I still really enjoy the final artwork enough to publish it, but like sometimes I'm like, why I am still such a perfectionist that I cannot just let go everything and publish that early sketch, which is cute enough to be published. But yeah, this is like the struggle of cartoonists. So these are like how they look inside the zine. Basically after, sorry, there is this part that I missed. I scan it, I scan the pencil, and then I turn it into this darker line that kind of look almost, it's ink, but it's a pencil. That's why it's kind of rusty, and that's why there is some imperfection. And I kind of appreciate that, because when I ink with a marker, sometimes I'm too neat, or when I ink digitally, I can risk to overdo the line many times, and I feel like I lose something over there. But maybe it's just something that's my personal taste. It can work both ways. And this is how it look like when it's print. So I use this grayscale. That this is kind of a replica of the vibe of a risograph. So the risograph, it's this like a sort of photocopy machine from Japan that has colors, so you can print with these nice vibrant colors, and it gives you also a texture. And a lot of self-publishers use it. I don't know if I'm saying something that you know, but it's very common in the self-publishing industry, because it can give you all these beautiful colors, and it's not too expensive. And yes, I guess it's in Spanish, so it's not very clear, but it's quite like explain itself. And so this is my latest project that I published in October, and it came out for a short box art book fair, comic art book fair. It's like a digital comic fair happening in the UK, but online, so internationally everywhere, for the month of October each year. And basically, it's a very cool project. They pick around 100 artists, and that we apply, I think we apply November or December. And when they pick you, you have around 6-7 months to make a comic, and you can make whatever you want. It's you own it. You will just leave it on the platform for the month. And so if you want to make a graphic novel, you can, or if you want to make a shorter story, you can. And personally, I wanted to make a 34 pages story. I mean, I wasn't sure at the time that would have been 34 pages, but I was thinking of something short. And as you can see from the picture, it's kind of like inspired from a place I've been, and that's a young version of me in a holiday in Iceland. It's been very interesting to work on this, because I kind of play with two things I really love. As I said, I do a lot of autobiographical stuff, but I also really love fiction. And I think I learned a lot by doing this project because I kind of reinterpreted something that I lived and made it up for the purpose of the story. So I kind of like, yeah, it's kind of like cooking. You have the ingredients, which is the autobiography, but then when you cook, something else happen, and you kind of find a new flavor, and you find something that it wasn't like at all your original story. It's something different and self-conclusive. So this story starts with the premises of me having gone to Iceland long time ago, 11 years ago, and fell in love with the place and thinking, I really want to draw this. Like at some point, I want to make something based here just for having the excuse to draw these beautiful landscapes. And also, I felt like it was great to try to tell shortly in a fictionalized way something that happened to me while I was in this holiday. I started like realizing that maybe the relationship I was in wasn't what I thought. Like I felt that maybe it was over and we were both not completely aware. When you're in love for a long time, sometimes you might feel not aligned with where the things are going. And I wanted to kind of tell the moment in which things are not like officially spoken, but there are some feelings and some emotions. I really like telling stories in which there are a moment of clarity, a moment of like, yeah, a very specific moment in which something makes you understand that things are different, or like you're self-aware of what's going on. So this is like how the process went. I started doodling. Often I start just drawing and I don't really know exactly what's gonna happen. But since I already knew the place, I already knew it was a story based on a trip, I could have done like a list of all the things happen in this trip and making like a sort of like a plot line. I also started like brainstorming moments of my real trip with my ex-boyfriend, which I want to specify. If you read it, I don't know, or if you will read it, it wasn't the same character of the comic, and our relationship was different, and it was much more nuanced than the one in the comic. And then I started doing this thing that I learned through Linda Berry. I bet a lot of you might know The Syllabus, her book about writing and writing comics. So she has this exercise called the spiral, in which you kind of make reemerge from your memories a moment, a memory from your past, following her guidelines. And I already did this exercise many times through my practice, but this time I went there aware I wanted kind of immerse myself into a specific moment of that holiday. So I kind of did it with the purpose of like writing more from like an instinctive point of view than like a planning point of view. I over plan things, so I try to trick myself into being more spontaneous, I guess. So after doing this brainstorming while doing the spiral, you have to write one page. And I wrote this page in first person, and it's like an interior monologue that then helped me building the interior monologue of the main character in the story, which was very like interesting as a process. I highly recommend it. And then I also started doodling with no much pressure, all the beautiful places I saw in Iceland and the ugly picture I took of Iceland. I mean, picture in Iceland, it's hard to make ugly picture because the view is beautiful, but the quality of my photos wasn't the best. And then also starting like brainstorming these characters, trying to give them their personality. Here you can see the first script. I don't write a script, but like I kind of wrote the dialogues and like the scenes of each moment as if it was already the pages of the book. And then on the right, you can see like a preview of my storyboards. And since I guess I prepared so much myself for this story before with this personal research and writing, I kind of had very clear what I wanted to tell. And I think it kind of came very spontaneous to me. I did it very quickly. I did the storyboard in one day, which was kind of insane. These are some pages of the storyboards. As you can see, are very fast. That's also why I did it in one day. And here I did a little GIF. This is stuff that I do for my Patreon where I show the process. So I did a little GIF to show what happens when I put the stuff on the computer and then I do my digital pencil. So yeah, this is basically how I gonna end up with, and I gonna print this basically and ink on it with the pencil as I showed you. So this is the digital pencil that I print. And this is the process. Again, the same paper I was mentioning before. And this is one like of my favorite part of the process. Is very relaxing. And I mean, I've been going fast in this because I had a tight schedule, but I still really enjoy the phase of inking, and then all this tweaking is maybe the worst part, the part that is more boring that you do digitally. These are some pictures, again, awkward pictures of me in Iceland that I used for kind of like picking a little bit of a palette to inspire myself for the story. And when I work on the palette, or when I color, I normally have 1 or 2 pages on a side when I do a new one to always keep like coherence with the colors and try to pick the same colors for same kind of things like the grass or the landscape. These are some of the final pages. This is like a spread page, but I hidden the below part because there is spoilers. And these are more elements like inspired from the trip. Like you can see the picture and you can see like what I took from the picture. Here are like some brainstorming about the cover. I always try to do a lot of visual brainstorming when I do the cover to try to allow myself to have also bad ideas, but just not judge myself when I do this, like this first part. I think I learned it from when I do illustration for editorial. Like I just brainstorming whatever without telling myself that this is a stupid idea, and then I go back and I'm like, this sucks. This is not working, and this could be better. And that really helps me to then develop something that I might not have thought at first. And this is like how the final cover look like, and some parts of the evolution of the work. And here's a little moment from the book, one of the parts that I use for the from the spiral exercise of Linda Berry. And let me try to hide. Oops, okay. I want to read to you. Everywhere I look, it's so beautiful. Then why do I feel so miserable? Hi. This is the first smile I've seen in days. I cannot, sorry. I cannot read it because I have this thing on top of it from Zoom. Well, I'm sorry. You can read it. I'll let you read it. Oops. That's all.